Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video, I'm going to do the to reread or not to reread tag. I was tagged in videos by Pat at Book Chat with Pat, Kevin at Kevin Toll Reads, in the comments of a video by Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading. Thank you all for tagging me. I repeat what they said to properly credit the creator of this tag. To read or not to read tag was created by Bob at Robert G. Reader of Books R3P. This is what Bob had to say about rereading books. A perennial topic among booktubers and readers in general is whether it's worthwhile to reread a book or is just a waste of time. It's a question I don't think has ever received its own proper formal post, that is one with prompts. If it's already been done, no offense intended, I'm not trying to take the wind from anyone's sails. Here's my take. There are 8 prompts. The first prompt is, do you reread fiction? Why or why not? I mostly don't reread fiction. The reason I don't is because every book I reread is a new book I can't read. I do recognize that rereads will give you a richer experience of the book, but it's just, for me, it's strongly on the side of I prefer reading a new book to rereading. I could list fairly easily the books I've reread, but there's not been that many. The second prompt is, do you reread nonfiction? Why or why not? I don't ever recall rereading nonfiction. The nonfiction book that's made the most impact on my life, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, that's the kind of book I would refer back to if necessary, because I'm still doing the KonMari process. But that's not exactly the same as rereading, I don't think. It's just, you get a book that, a reference book, a self-help book that does in fact help you, you need to reread it. And actually I did get another book from her, which was sort of like the first book with some different points. So maybe that's sort of rereading, but it's not exactly the same book. I can't remember what the name of the second book is. The third prompt is, if you reread fiction, what kind of fiction are you most likely to choose? Bestsellers, classical literature, genre fiction, fantasy, science fiction, mysteries, romance, western, adventure stories. What is your reasons for the choices you've made? I guess here I will say the ones that I've reread and say why I think I did so. I might miss something, but as I said above, there's not that many. I've read Dracula 3 times, and the reasons I've read it 3 times is I really like the story. The times that I reread it are separated a lot, so I really didn't remember that much despite it being a lot of movies and stuff. So it was mostly like a new read for me. I've reread War of the Worlds 3 times. Again, that's a story I like a lot. Also like Dracula, widely separated times reading. I should say Dracula by Bram Stoker and War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I reread War of the Worlds 3 times. And because of the separated times, it was almost like a new read. Again, despite it being in movies and stuff, although the movies are a fair amount different from the book, at least the movies I've seen. Those are both classic books, both, well, one is horror, one of the first vampire novels, not the first, but one of the first, the most famous, and one is a classic science fiction novel. Another book that I read 3 times is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. Another classic book, another sci-fi / horror book, depending on how you want to look at it. I could look at it as both. I reread it the second time just because I had gotten, it was either, I think it was $1.99, I got the complete works of H.G. Wells from Amazon. Not the greatest version of it, because you got all his works, but it was really cheap. So, and I reread some of the stuff, And that was one that I reread. I read that a third time because I wanted to read back to back that book and The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I thought it'd be cool to read a more modern take of the book right after reading the original, but I only got a little ways into The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. I did like it. I will get back to it. It's just my reading flits to something else, and that's just how it goes. So that book was a little different because the third read, not that it's not a good book, it is, but it's not quite in the class for me of Dracula, and it's not quite in the class for me as Dracula and War of the Worlds. In my reread of H.G. Wells, I also reread The Time Machine, and that's just another classic novel of H.G. Wells. I should say that when I was a kid, probably junior high school time, probably into high school, H.G. Wells and Jules Verne were two authors I really liked. And I'll talk a little bit about Jules Verne a little later. I just read that because it's a classic book and did not disappoint on a reread. Another classic, another sci-fi novel. I also read Journey to the Center of the Earth. Actually, it was called Journey to the Center of the Earth the first time I read it. The version I read last time was called Journey to the Interior of the Earth, which I understand that's the original version, the original name. I think it's originally in French, but I think that's how it translates to. And it did not disappoint too. That I remember some of the stuff, but it did not disappoint in a reread. Yeah, sure, some of it's fantastical, but a really good book. Another kind of a travel adventure, I suppose, but also Verne is more, I don't know, science speculation to my mind than science fiction, but really liked it on a reread. Another book I recently reread, all these books I should say the first time were a long time when I was a kid, and reread. And sometimes when I read a book a second time, it's more recently, and the third time more recently than that, but originally as a kid. And another one was The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle, obviously most known for Sherlock Holmes. But this was a book where basically they discover a place where dinosaurs and kind of different humanoids, maybe species of apes that are intelligent, can't remember exactly, but live. But I just love that stuff. It's basically discovering a place from a different time where there were still prehistoric creatures, dinosaurs and other creatures, coexisting with more, humanoid species too. But that was a really good book I reread. More recently it's probably in the 80s. I read maybe it was the 90s, but I read The Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, Interview with the Vampire Lestat, and Queen of the Damned. And a year or two ago, I reread them. They are horror, a more modern take on vampires, perhaps considered, say, the anti-hero, more romantic vampire. I know some people hate that stuff, but I loved it. And the second time I loved it too. It was big enough time between I didn't remember too much, so just a book I loved several decades ago, a series of books I loved several decades ago, and I loved it again on reread. I don't remember what my impetus for rereading those books was, but I did love them on a reread. And the final thing I think of, which is still ongoing, although I haven't read in a while, is I read... This is starting fairly recently, maybe, 10, 15 years ago. I first read many of the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, and I again read many of the stories a second and third time, and more recently I got a book called The Complete Tales of H.P. Lovecraft, and I've been going through it kind of slowly. When I feel like it, I read something from it. It works because they're short stories mostly, maybe a couple of novellas, but mostly short stories. Early on in that book, I wasn't quite getting the feeling I got in the original read, but as the point I'm in recently, I have gotten that feeling. It has given me the same feeling of reading his stories. And that's just, I just had an impetus of reading them again. And I am. Probably the last time, but it's good to go through them again. And there are a couple of books that I read recently and reread recently. The first is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, a really good romance. I rated it 5 stars on the original read. I reread it because it was the book club for a Fable book club. And I decided that if I like the book enough, I'm going to reread it if it's a book club pick. If I didn't like it, I'm not going to reread it. But if I liked it enough, I'm going to reread it. Still 5 stars on a reread. And I also read Frankenstein a year or two ago and reread it. That was also for a reread for a book club. And because I like Frankenstein the read, I read it for the book club, and I liked it on the reread too. So that's one reason that I will, considering if I like the book originally, I will reread it for a book club. I guess that's really a long-winded answer to this prompt, but you can see the books I read and why I reread them. As far as I can remember, those are the only ones. I'm sure there might be a few others, but there's not many. It's possible, too, that I don't remember. I read a book and I read it again. I've read so many books. I've probably been reading like 60 years. So there's a lot of books that I read, and I might not remember all of them. Oh, there is one more book I read a second time that I thought of just now. And that is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. It was, I don't know, can't say for sure exactly, maybe 20 years that I read it originally. I liked it a lot. And on the reread, I still liked it, but not quite as much. I found the language use on occasion kind of impenetrable, and I won't study a book to try to figure out what's said. I don't know why when I read it originally I didn't have an issue with this, and a reread I did, and I can't remember why I reread that book. Maybe it was just a lot of people on here talking about it. That could well be it, but that's another one I reread. Unfortunately, I can't remember why. It's a horror novel, coming of age too, but a horror novel. Don't want to say I didn't like it because I did. It was just the second time, not as much the first time. It's not a book I expect to read a third time. These other ones I mentioned, I probably won't, but I would more likely read them a third or even a fifth time in case of Lovecraft. The fifth prompt is, if you've read a book which has been translated from another language, would you reread the same book in a new or different translation? I doubt it. I don't read nearly as many books translated in foreign languages as I should. I think I'd want to read a new one. The only proviso is being if a book club did it, but I don't think I'd have interest enough to reread a book, just hoping that there's something different there. As I said about my rereads, in most cases I didn't remember very much about the original, so if I was going to want to do it, I'd want to be able to identify differences, and I'm not going to do the work like taking notes and annotating and stuff like that to try to do that. The sixth prompt is, how many times would you reread the same book? Well, I guess I'd say 4 because I'm rereading a lot of the stories of H.P. Lovecraft for the 4th time. I don't know if any of the books I mentioned I'm going to do again, so 4 is going to be probably the tops. The 7th prompt is, what's the most recent book you've reread? That is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I just completed that book. By the time this tag comes out, the video right before this is probably the review of it, so I reread that very recently. It is the May book for one of the book clubs I'm part of. before I go to the 8th one, which is the tag some others, just want to say one of the original questions here is, perennial topic among booktubers to read in general is whether it's worthwhile to reread a book or is it just a waste of time. To me, I'm going to say, if you think it's worthwhile, you should do it. If you think it's a waste of time, don't do it. I'm not going to tell people whether something's worthwhile or not to them. It's your time. It's how you want to do it. As I said, I recognize you can get a richer experience by rereading, at least if you remember stuff better than I do. Or the flip side is, every time you reread, it's another book you don't read. So it's do what works for you. That should be all you're reading. Do what works for you. Even if I say something like something is a bad book or something, you might love it. So do what works for you. Okay, now the 8th prompt is tag some people. If you're watching this video, please consider yourself tagged. If you'd like to do a video, please do so, answering one or more of the prompts. Tag me in your video. I'd be interested in seeing it. If you'd like to reply to one or more of the prompts in my comments, please do that too. I like to read those. But I am going to tag a bunch of people. I'm tagging Smitty, Kayla, Milena, Maeve, Nick, Heather, Brian, Fred, Flossie, Justin, Renee, Felix, Hannah, Jen, Suey, Daniela, Cliff, Philip, Elaine, Nigel. Again, if this is something you like to do, please do. So this is one I think like most of us think about. So I think we're all going to have a view on this one. Some of the tags, it's kind of hard to answer, but this one I think everybody's going to have an answer because you have decided things in your reading. So I think this tag is probably one that everybody could provide some interesting answers to these prompts. I hope you're having a wonderful reading week. I hope you're having a wonderful week in general. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe. Please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.